Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 3 of the 124 release retrospective. My name is Jeremy. I'll be the facilitator for today. Just a reminder before we get going, this meeting is covered by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, so please be mindful of the things that you say on this meeting and abide. And if you participate, you're agreeing to participate or to follow the Kubernetes Code of Conduct. We'll also be recording this meeting and it will be available on YouTube. So if you'd like to not have your camera on or mute or anything, feel free to DM me on Slack and I can raise any concerns or bring your input to the meeting. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started so we can try to get through the remainder of what we have. We have had through 2 other sessions of this retro, and in those we went through following up on the previous retro items. We largely went through the what went well section, and we went through what could have gone better. If you have any topics you'd like to add to those, feel free to do so. You can highlight them in whatever color, something to just kind of to show us that we need to go back and hit those. Drop a message into the chat, and we can definitely, we don't have a scribe. We can definitely go back and hit those things, but looking at the chat right now, we don't have a scribe. So if anybody would like to volunteer for that, it'd be really useful. Ray couldn't be here today for that. Okay, so we ended the previous time down here. So we have a few items to talk about, but I see that we have one thing to go back to. So one of the topics we discussed yesterday was meetings being pinned to UTC. And James, do you have one topic you want to return to there?
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about in yesterday was the idea that we didn't. Well, the people that were talking didn't seem to care if it was in UTC or not, but they cared if it moved in their time zone. So if a meeting is in UTC and you're in Pacific, then when you enter daylight savings or leave daylight savings, the meeting will move into your perspective, which they found quite annoying. And I do sympathize with that. And the point there was it shouldn't move on your thing. We should move it to account for that. But that's not universally possible, because even the places that do observe daylight savings enter it at different times. So this year, North America and most of North America, most of the EU entered daylight savings 2 weeks apart. And some parts of the world don't observe DST at all. Of course, Arizona, much parts of the state of Arizona does not observe daylight savings. I think the entirety of India does not observe daylight savings. So if we were to do that, we would have to pick a place that we follow the DST for. And this isn't a problem for 125, because 125, I believe, does not go over daylight savings boundary, but 126 will. So the person who does the scheduling for 126, probably the 126 lead, will need to make a decision about whether they want to move it for DST, and if so, who they are following to do that, which traditionally has been Pacific, but as we discussed, not always is the best option because we have a more global team these days. That was what I wanted to say.
Awesome. I tried to capture most of that in the notes underneath of there. If anybody else has any other topics to discuss again for the UTC period, things shifting, meetings being pinned to UTC, bring them up now, or we're going to move on to try to tackle the last of our items. Okay, don't hear any, so I'm going to jump back down to where we left off, and that is beginning with Mickey. Mickey, do you want to bring up your next 2 items?
Yep, absolutely. So each team within the release team, obviously has different periods of time during which their workloads increase. For example, enhancements may be very front-loaded, communications, docs, especially comms, are very backloaded. And for me, one thing that I found challenging was keeping my team engaged throughout the release process. I mean, for comms, essentially the first almost 8 weeks of the release, you do nothing, or at least very, very close to nothing. And most of the work that's required can be accomplished by one person, by the lead. And in the case of this release, I had, thankfully, one person who was very engaged throughout the release process. But the other folks in the team sort of would ebb and flow with the amount of attention that they could provide this. And then especially during the period of time where we extended past the original release date, folks kind of dropped off the face of the planet. And for what it's worth, it was not for lack of trying on my part, just with regards to trying to send out notifications to people and keep people engaged. So I just wanted to talk about different mechanisms for informing people about, when they're going to be expected to do things during the release and how to keep people engaged and excited throughout the process.
Jesse, go ahead. You have your hand raised.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to kind of mention that some on the call will recognize this conversation. It's come up before. I think it was in the 122 retro and maybe the 123 retro as well. So I think maybe that's just calling out that we have tried to do some work here. I think an observation that we had, and we had a lot more people in that conversation, so I don't want to quote people, but I feel like we came to the realization that maybe with Kubernetes becoming more popular, people see the release team as sort of like something, I don't want to say this the wrong way, because it really is fun and exciting and it's a cool thing to do, but it's community service. It's not like you're a rock star now because you're on the release team. And I think that sometimes people think it is, and then it isn't that, and then they sort of fall off and they're like, oh, that's not what I signed up for. And I know Jeremy, I think Jeremy, you actually did some changes to the survey, to the sort of like, sort of the sign up process. So I think we have done some work here. This might just point to us needing to do more work. Because I really do. I think it's like a community service. And I think that it's really rewarding and really great fun if that's what you're looking for. If you think it's like, I'm going to do the Kubernetes, yeah, it's like, well, you're kind of working with spreadsheets and stuff. Like, it's not that. So it's really rewarding and really fun. But I think we have to tell the right story. And I think, like I said, I think you already had made some progress there. So maybe this is just keep improving.
Do you see any concrete things that we could do right now to enhance the handbooks, or maybe the communications we send out when we're on trying to solicit shadows? And this is an open question for anybody else that's on the call right now too.
Go ahead, James.
I had a thought about the handbooks, actually. I wonder if it's just like in the kind of first part of the handbook, before we get down into the individual roles, and possibly in the individual roles as well, just kind of describe for all 6 areas and lead maybe, just a rough like curve to show you what your time expectation is for the team, because it is very different. Because enhancements is this giant spike at the front and then kind of nothing, and then a spike around code freeze, and then you're done. Whereas communication comms is nearly the complete opposite of that. And other things have different things as well. Like release notes has like kind of bumps as it goes along, and then a big spike at the end as it's doing with different release things. So I think that could be a good way to like visualize and communicate to people kind of, roughly speaking, what the team does at different times.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out. Changes to the run books. I think also one of the topics we discussed yesterday might help as well, which is just keeping a regular cadence. I feel like those burn down meetings kind of became burnout meetings at a point where folks just stopped attending because there were meetings every single day. And I think especially having the extension of the release timeline after that point really made folks just kind of drop off the face of the planet.
Leo, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's quite like different from each shadow. So for example, I also set up one-on-one meetings as an optional. So if they're interested, they can just reach me. I have like some scheduled times where I'm available and so on. But this was not useful for this cycle. But I for example, like we had also a mid-cycle in like team internal meeting, which was very good apparently. So I don't know, it's probably at the end just like your gut feeling what's best for your team or basically for each person. For example, I think what also was quite good, there's like some initiatives in CS Signal which were besides like the boring day-to-day observing test grid stuff. So for example, I don't know, recording like some short clips and so on. So maybe some tasks besides the usual tasks are also interested, because then you are just getting a bit out of like the boring day-to-day cycle and have some exciting things on the side maybe. Yeah.
Okay, we have a couple more people that have their hands raised. Jesse.
Yeah, I think the other thing I was going to note is this does vary team to team. I think that's what you just pointed out, Leo. Like, it was easier for me to gauge people as a docs lead than as a comms lead, for example, because docs lead, the docs team is doing a lot of stuff, a lot actually, and kind of like for most of the cycle. And I think if you capture people's interest and like they get excited about the work in comms, it doesn't really start until like, I don't know, Mickey, like week 8 or 9 or even 10. And then it actually can go over the release, which is, it's interesting. So I think some of this is really about our role handbooks, maybe calling out to the leads to really communicate what your view of the team's role is and to prepare people for that. We don't tend to do that before, so maybe we have to call that out too in recruiting or asking for people to contribute. So they really look at like the teams, not only like what you think your skills vibe with, but like the timeline and where and like kind of what role the team plays. So I don't know, maybe helpful.
Yeah. Sorry to mute for a second. I think that's super useful. And I think we had a call out yesterday as an action item to maybe go back and look at all the handbooks. I think this is another thing that we could add as a review of those handbooks. As outgoing leads, how do people feel about trying to capture some of that in their outgoing role handbooks?
I think that's a great idea. I plan on doing that.
I think we had so we'll just add an AI here.
I was going to add some diagrams. I think diagrams would be a good way to visualize this.
Okay, cool. I think that's a good good takeaway. We should go back. I mean, we should always go back and like make sure that those things are fresh, but I think we've captured a couple of concrete things here, specifically around expectation setting. James, your idea about diagrams and visualizing, I think will be useful too. So I'll work with Ray to follow up, since he's going to be the EA for this cycle, and we'll follow up with all the role leads from 124 to try to make sure we capture some of that, and obviously work with the 125 incoming leads as well. Any other commentary, suggestions, ideas around that before we move on? All right, Mickey, second one, collaborating with SIGs.
Yeah, so I think this got brought up yesterday, but I love the idea of just having some sort of communication with the SIGs to remind them what the release team does and what expectations we have for those SIGs. Because in a lot of cases, the release team is just ensuring that the SIGs are doing all their activities at the right time and that, you know, everything has been done correctly and according to the process. And a lot of what we do is just basically taking, you know, opted-in content and then make sure that it makes the release timeline. In the case of comms, I don't know if it was unique to this release, but it was very difficult to get people to provide content for the removals blog and also for the features blog, and major themes as well, all of which are opt-in. And in spite of the fact that they're opt-in, you know, of course, you don't want to go to market with 0 pieces of content in your blog, or 14 from storage and none from any other SIG. So I just wanted to make sure that we had some mechanism to re-engage with the SIGs and remind them what the release team's all about so that they actually are excited and willing to participate in the release.
Do you see that as something that the release team lead and the lead shadows should be doing maybe early in 125, or the real
I think that would
themselves?
I think that would be a great thing to do early on in the release. I mean, it's like, I know James sent some communications out to the SIGs, and I have to, give him credit for helping me by sending some sending emails about, upcoming blog opportunities or things like that. But I think maybe just hitting them early and often would be a good idea.
Yeah, I think that I could have communicated more in this, I think. One of the things which Ray did, which I didn't do, was have like mid-cycle email updates. I only really emailed when something was happening, not just in general. And that, I think, didn't help keep up communication. That wasn't an intentional choice. It just slipped my mind. I didn't put it down to do it, and then I didn't do it. And by the time I realized it was too late. So maybe that needs to be something that's added for future releases.
And then maybe more broadly, and I don't know exactly how you'd want to write this down, so you can leave it for the moment, but figuring out how to collaborate with the SIGs in a productive way, I think, is really important. I mean, for example, I got a lot of docs feedback or blog feedback from teams that had a lot of institutional knowledge and would only like sprinkle it out to me in the occasional GitHub comments. So the review process for some of the blogs took like weeks when it probably could have been done more quickly. And I don't really know how to articulate that, but it just goes back to a desire to collaborate with the SIGs a little bit better. Have them recognize that in a lot of cases, we're part of the release team, but maybe not part of other SIGs, and also maybe do not have the institutional knowledge that they have when it comes to Kubernetes releases.
Okay, that sounds like a good objective for 125. Maybe we can think about what that engagement model looks like and how we can set up a more collaborative relationship. Anything else on that one before we move on? I think this is the last one. If anybody has anything they'd like to add to the agenda, feel free to add it. We've got a few parking lot items that we can go through as well. But otherwise, we can definitely end the meeting a little early today.
One question. So
yeah,
this mid-cycle updates, is this something that is needed to be added to the role handbook for the release lead, that we send out those emails?
I think it should be. It's something I missed because I didn't write it down on a checklist, and those was everything else. I didn't think about it.
I can add it.
That's good. Great feedback and suggestion. Thanks, Leo. Do you want to take the action to do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Anything else? All right, moving on. Comms. Jesse.
I frankly think we probably covered this one, right? I think this was just a general call out that I had during discussion of something else, where it's not the first time I've heard, and I experienced this as well as a comms lead for 122, sort of toward the end. Comms is one of the teams, and it might happen to other teams too, but like where everything's going so fast, and comms is just can easily get lost in the shuffle. And I think you only see it if you've been a comms lead. No offense to anybody who hasn't been, but I think it's one of those things where you're just like, okay, they're fine. Like comms might not be fine because they own so little. Even the content they're helping manage get out the door, they don't really own the blogs. They own scheduling the blogs, and they own making sure that they happen. So it's a very intangible deliverable that's super, super important. So I don't know if that goes into, maybe that even might go into part of what, maybe that goes in the lead handbook. Just be like, hey, check in with comms, maybe more often than you think you should.
Yeah.
It might just be that simple. But anyway, that's just an observation. Mickey might have more to add, or anybody.
No, I like the idea of an extra call out to the lead handbook, and maybe even not just the lead one, but also all of the teams that comms is dependent on. So for example, like enhancements and release notes as well.
Yeah, I did notice the release notes, like CC was a release notes lead. You and she and I think Ray all agreed yesterday that, yeah, major themes owned by release notes. If you read release notes handbook, the release notes handbook is like, hey, comms will set up meetings with you so that you can do this work. Like, oh, that's a nuance that no one saw. So like, yeah, even in other teams where you have sort of stakeholder dependencies, that makes sense.
Mickey,
Yeah,
oh, sorry, I was gonna just ask if anybody wanted to take an action to go and suggest some wording in those handbooks. I think either Mickey or Jesse probably are really well suited to do that, since they've been comm leads and they have that perspective. Do either of you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. Okay. And if I forget, someone can remind me.
It'll be me. That's my
Yes.
AI. I'll remind you.
Perfect.
And if you want any help or anything, or if you need to pass it off,
For sure.
I'm here.
For sure.
All right, James, you were going to say something, I think.
I was going to say, I agree that. So I'm someone who I didn't do comms and I didn't do docs either or anything like that on my path kind of through the release team. So I think, yeah, I don't think I gave comms enough attention at the end of the release. I think I was primarily looking at like things like CI signal, things like the extension, trying to figure out what was going on over there. So I think, yeah, some extra guidance on that in the handbook would be a good thing. Just at the end, just to say, you need to keep an eye on this to try and figure out what's going on, because chances are they're going to need some help. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I'm going to self-call my raised hand. So just to double say this was not a call out for you or any other previous. And also for you specifically, I was a shadow for you and I said, I got docs and comms, and I did. And I think we did okay. I mean, there are certain aspects of this you just can't predict, but putting it in the role handbook for when you and I aren't there in the future is really, I think, the thing we want. So I just wanted to say that again. I think you did a great job.
Oh no, sorry, I didn't think it was a call out. I'm just agreeing that it could be better.
It could be, and especially if we go a couple cycles and things are real light and easy and everybody forgets this, and then it's real hard all over again. So I think that's the thing. This is like board and policy work. Mm-hmm. We're leaving behind artifacts to help other people do this better in the future. So.
Yeah, and if something's not in a handbook, it basically doesn't exist.
Yep.
Right.
That's both of those things I think are super great points to reinforce. One, we're leaving behind artifacts to help people do this better in the future. And two, if it's not in the handbook, it doesn't exist, because like that's just institutional knowledge. Like going back to Mickey's earlier point, I think like there's a lot of institutional knowledge, and if people don't have that and it's not documented anywhere, then it doesn't really exist.
Yeah, then you just have to get really lucky with your release team and hope that everyone's been around the block a few times.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on that topic? I think we have a couple of good actions to come out of that as well. Okay. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to earlier in the agenda? Any go backs, any additional call outs for what went well, kind of shout outs, things that didn't go so well that need to be thought of for next time? I don't think we saw anything flagged up here besides that one. All right, a couple things in the parking lot down here. It looks like you crossed one out. Do you want to, are we good on that one, or is there any other discussion on that?
Yeah, so we discussed this, and I believe we're trying to make that project beta working instead of creating the dashboard. So I just wanted to, like save your time until we got something using the project beta. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure we covered that. Jesse, you have one in the parking lot about general top-down shadow templates.
Yeah, I've tried to kick up a conversation on this in Slack a couple times, and it's like people are like, yes, but then nobody has reasons. I kind of feel like no. That's my feeling here, and I think I'm prepared to say that on the discussion. And I'm gonna close this in a week unless somebody gives me a real good reason to keep this open. I think we're hitting a lot of the things that this was meant to touch on in sort of updates to role handbooks, and I think inherently we're calling out that the teams within the team are different. So as far as like the shadow templates, I think that there is some common stuff and that already exists. I don't know if other people on this call have a different feeling on that. Cool. All right, so I'll update that discussion, and then we'll just close it out in a week or so if nobody comes back. Looking at you, Josh, wherever you are.
All right. Leo, I'm not sure how effective the weekly CI signal reports are.
Yeah, this was just like just general wondering, because there's not much feedback about the CI signal report that is scheduled every week. So I think it's useful, but I don't know. So just basically it's difficult to improve or to find any improvements or things in general about the report if there's no discussion around it. So because it's sent out every week, it's also kind of spam maybe from time to time. I don't know. It's just wondering if it would make sense to create a survey or to find other ways to discuss this, or if it's not needed, then it's fine as it is. But yeah,
I think a survey would be useful. We've done a couple so far. We did one for release cadence. We're doing one now for just in terms of SIG release. We've done one for the release cadence that Sasha just sent the results out for. We're doing one now to kind of gather feedback and input about doing the branch rename from master to main. I think it's great to get feedback, and I think that engaging with contributor experience and the folks that have been sending these out using the CNCF SurveyMonkey account would be a great idea here too. And I think there's a channel where you can go and request survey. Actually, there's a GitHub issue that I can point you to. So I'll send you the link to the GitHub issue. Yeah, it's an issue template.
Okay, so yeah, I think I would then create this issue and then just, I don't know, do some brainstorming, maybe in a SIG release meeting, or I don't know, with the new CI signal team after it's set up, to find the questions and so on.
That's a great idea, because when you send the survey issue, you have to send them a link to questions. So it's a good one.
Yeah, maybe we could modify the distro that the list gets sent to. Because I'm just thinking that every single week I saw it, and every single week I ignored it.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe that can be a question in the survey. So Leo, do you want to add an item to the next SIG release meeting to discuss that? I think there won't be one for a couple of weeks because of KubeCon, but
yeah. But I think after the CI signal team is set up and so on, it's a good idea anyways. Then
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Anything else on that one? All right. Don't think Grace is here. Let's see. Didn't see her when I was clicking through the attendees. She had one here we've had discussion about the enhancement subproject, about tracking the GitHub project beta document going forward. I think this is a good one to take to the SIG release general meeting and discuss about what we want to do with that going forward.
Yeah, so I believe this is the same thing Grace and myself working on it right now, trying to enhance the, like sub projects release. So instead of having the spreadsheet, we're trying to use the project beta instead. But to be honest, because it's still beta project, so it's a little bit hard. I'm trying to set up a GitHub action right now for the bug triage, trying to make this work. It's a lot of process, like I'm not sure who is the person I need to reach out to make this fast, but yeah, but hopefully we can get this done, or at least start with a good process this release cycle.
Okay. Anything else on that one?
Not from my side.
Okay. Thanks for the context in that. That's super useful. And then the last one was from Rob, who I also don't think is here. Merging meeting scheduling and diverse team selection. Would it be useful for both issues to be able to visualize both shadow and then select the team members from a location on our point of view? It's basically a map of where people are located. This kind of seems like it might be a useful follow on to some of the visualization work that was done in that new repo for kind of visualizing the release team stuff. Do you think it's worthwhile doing, Leo, you've been pushing that forward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's worthwhile doing a more broad or more presentations on that so people are more aware of it? And
yeah, so yeah, there's so we are planning to do a chart or like a pie chart to visualize where the applicants are coming from. But I think the idea of putting it on the map is actually quite good, because then you basically just get the, I don't know, I think it's a better visualization of it's better than the pie chart for this type of data. The only question is how you can automatically generate this, which would be quite fun to do, or I don't know. But yeah, I think definitely it would be a good idea if we want to do this to also integrate this directly in this repository. Yeah, I can look it up.
I think we might need to ask more precise data about like this, unless I don't know what we've asked for 125, but previously we've only asked like time zone, which isn't.
Yeah, it would be very nice if we could have like a selection, because then we are very sure like about the input, because right now sometimes this is also, I think, one of the points that Rob said yesterday. When you enter IST, for example, it could be India, it could be Ireland, it could be something else. So yeah, our map would be kind of based on some assumptions. So basically everybody is saying IST is India because 90% of the time it's India. So maybe we could, I don't know if there's like some smart, I don't know, input value on those Google forms. Otherwise we would have like a very long selection list.
Yeah, we'll have to think about how to do that. Because I mean, I suppose you can ask country, but then people might move or be moving between areas, and just country can be quite big. I mean, you could say United States and you could mean anything from New York to Hawaii. It's quite a broad range.
Okay, sounds like we can do some investigation and figure out if there's things we need to change in the form that might better support this. But we are moving kind of in that path where we're going to have a visualization, at least of time zones, that we can use to help better pick things. All right. Anything else that anybody would like to bring up? Any burning topics they'd like to discuss before we adjourn and call it a day on the 124 release?
Do we get any t-shirts, James?
I need to do that. I need to reach out to people and start talking about merch.
We
That's a
didn't get our
whole.
we didn't get our 123 t-shirts yet either. So
Yeah,
we have plenty of time.
I'm gonna try and figure it out. I have some ideas for doing like special stickers, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what I can do. I'm not gonna have anything by KubeCon, but
we have a connection at CNCF that handles a lot of that stuff, so I can I'll loop you in so you can start that conversation.
yeah, I think Ray also wanted to loop me in. I think Paris reached out on Twitter and was like, "Hey, we can get stickers or something." So I'll find someone who knows someone who can get me something. So I'll see what I can do.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, with that, I just want to thank everybody again for their participation, and we will go through and summarize all of the action items that are in here, document them down here, and make sure we can follow up with those things throughout the 125 release. Looking forward to seeing all the great things in 125, and thanks again to everybody on the 124 team for all of their persistent efforts in getting a high quality release out the door. All right. Hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your day. If you're going to KubeCon, please travel safely and have a good time. We'll see you around the internet. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.